So they decided to experiment. They did a lot of experimenting with Indians. Relocation program was one such experiment.
It was exciting, relocation. You get to go to a big city and they'll help you find a job, and you'll get to, see the rest of the country. Of course, you weren't forced to go on relocation, but they made it look good. Streets paved with gold. We ended up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Over 100,000 Indians were relocated in just 15 years. The government promised to help them find schools, housing, and employment. But for many, the promise rang hollow.
They put us in a real dumpy motel, and I was just sitting there thinking, I wonder what's going on at home. I could just see the rolling hills and the small town. They're all just moving and walking and going real fast, and nobody's stopping to look around. That's why we stayed in our apartments or stayed in our rooms.
If you went and applied for a job, you better not tell them you're Indian. You better tell them you're French or you're some Italian or some other nationality. You wouldn't get the job.
By the 1970s, half of all Indians lived in cities. But the relocation program produced an unanticipated result.
It pulled us all closer together. We could always spot each other in the city. So if we'd see an Indian on the street, walking down Market Street, we'd look at each other and we'd just smile and kind of shake our head, or, an acknowledgement of each other. We didn't care what tribe anyone was. We were Indian people. We were a race.
The new pan-Indian identity led to the growth of activist groups around the country. The American Indian movement was the most radical.
There were a lot of Native people that were afraid to stand up. Geronimo demonstrated, man. Crazy Horse demonstrated. And for us, the baby boom generation, circumstances were right. We could raise our voice.
Over the course of the siege, government forces would pound the village with more than 500,000 rounds of ammunition. It was inevitable that there would be casualties.
Where's that car? Where's that car?
Apparently has a wounded party. Don't bug me that much. I really don't mind getting shot. We are willing to sacrifice our lives for our children, so they will not have to grow up in the society we grew up in today.
Milo and myself got hit. We knew that no one was going to go through this completely unscathed. There was somebody that was going to get it again.
With the White House increasingly preoccupied with Watergate, the government had allowed the occupation of Wounded Knee to drag on. But at the end of March, the Justice Department sent a new negotiator who changed tactics.
Shortly after I arrived, the lifestyle was somewhat changed of the occupants of Wounded Knee. The electricity was cut off. The water line was cut.
Then Frizzell cut off the protesters' most vital lifeline. He ordered reporters to leave town.
Y'all get back in cars, okay? Just get back in cars till we get to word. Don't touch my hand either. Just get back in the car till we get to word.
I frankly think that the barring of the news media has had an effect on negotiations, a positive effect from the government's point of view, because
All of a sudden, those in Wounded Knee weren't seeing themselves on top of a pony waving an AK-47 at the American personnel on the ground.
Just when the siege was officially kicked off the airwaves, it got renewed publicity from an unlikely source, Hollywood.
But he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award.
Marlon Brando refused his Oscar for Best Actor in The Godfather in protest of the negative portrayal of Indians in the movies.
Excuse me.
Brando sent an Apache actress named Sacheen Littlefeather to represent him at the awards ceremony, watched by millions. Later, backstage, she explained Brando's absence.
I have indicated in this statement, Marlon Brando is on his way to Wounded Knee. At that time, you'll have to take me for his word.
Brando never made it to Wounded Knee. But a poll taken 4 days after the Oscars showed his sympathies were widely shared. Most Americans sided with the protesters. Within a week, the two sides reached a deal.
The siege of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, ended today. Representatives of the Indians and U.S. Interior Department officials formally signed the pact this afternoon inside the embattled village.
Government officials promised to investigate corruption on Pine Ridge and to immediately convene a White House meeting and congressional hearings on treaty rights. For their part, the protesters agreed to lay down their arms.
You know, the first thing Indians do is break out a drum. You know, so they started banging the drum and singing victory songs, and everybody was hooping and cheering, and that was a time when we really thought we won. And not only that, we thought that we had survived.
I talked to Chief Foolscrow, an elder and a full-blood. I offered him a ride on my helicopter if he could get this young Indian lad to let me ride his pony. He thought it was a wonderful gesture, and I did the same as I galloped off on that pony bareback.
Chief Badcobb, Medicine Man Leonard Prodog, and Russell Means rushed to Washington for a meeting at the White House. But the deal quickly collapsed over the critical detail of what was to happen first: the White House meeting, or the disarming of the protesters.
The White House will not negotiate while guns are pointed at federal officials in Wounded Knee. That is our position. I believe it offers the only hope for a peaceful solution, and I, for one, am prepared to stand by the agreement until hell freezes over.
If we give up our arms, hello? That is so stupid. It's beyond belief that they would even say that to the press. What? These stupid Indians are going to go to negotiate after they lay down their arms? What? Nobody does that in the entire world in history.
After the agreement unraveled, Russell Means was arrested. He would spend the rest of the occupation in jail.
Fun and games, so far as I'm concerned, are over. A United States Marshal has been seriously wounded.
Many of the some 300 persons in Wounded Knee are sick with bad colds. Doctors here report at least 15 persons have pneumonia.
The garbage is piling up. The food is running short. 1 meal a day is now the rule, and that's not much of a meal.
One time, one of the guys came in and he had a sack on his shoulders, and it was, I don't know, maybe a 50-pound bag of what they fed calves. So that's what we ate. We made pancakes out of it and whatever. We just treated it like flour.
We had been rationing ourselves to 1 meal a day, 1 full meal a day. We are cutting that effective today to 1/2 meal a day.
At the time, I was minding my own business in Boston, following the Wounded Knee story in the news like everybody else. One day, somebody walked into my office that I knew within the Boston anti-war movement. They had heard that I was a pilot, and they needed somebody to go in there who could fly over the federal blockade and bring them some food.
If there's any plane comes by here today, we don't want anybody taking any pot shots at them things, because it's going to be making a food drop to us today.
We operated out of Rapid City, South Dakota, 3 o'clock in the morning. We were over Wounded Knee about 40 seconds, made the drop, and we were gone. And 2,000 pounds of food landed in the village.
At first, we thought we were being attacked. We thought they were gassing us, because what it was the flour exploding and creating a big cloud, but then all of a sudden, we said, hey, well, this is food, so we're all out there gathering the food, and the FBI opens up on us.
The night before, a man named Frank Clearwater and his pregnant wife had arrived in the village. Clearwater said they had hitchhiked all the way from North Carolina.
When he came in, he had his own gun. He had a kind of a big long-barreled shotgun. And looked like he came out of the hills too. She said he was Cherokee. He looked like one of those mountain men.
They had ready-made cigarettes, which was a very big deal because we were all smoking in those days, and we were smoking cherry bark and things from the ground. And here was a ready-made cigarette. And so I remember Frank Clearwater lit it up, and we passed it around in a circle like a form of communion.
When bullets began to fly on the day of the food drop, Frank Clearwater took refuge with other protesters in a church. As they hugged the floor in an effort to stay out of harm's way, a bullet tore through the plasterboard wall and struck Clearwater in the head. He had been in Wounded Knee for less than 24 hours.
A brother named Strawberry had his hand on the back of his head, and he was holding his skull. I put my hand on his skull, tried to hold his brains in, and we took him in the clinic, and they couldn't save him.
The first death intensified the government's determination to bring the siege to an end. In mid-April, a unit was put on alert at an army base in Colorado. According to plans leaked to the press, the government was prepared to move into Wounded Knee with armored helicopters and tear gas.
The White House, the Department of Justice, were concerned with the confrontation going on all during the month of May into the summer. The college campuses, I was told, would be emptying out, and all the adventure seekers would be infiltrating Wounded Knee. I was given a 10-day deadline.
Officials were destabilizing the occupation using covert tactics.
I have some information I think that you'll be interested in, and it's based on a source that we have utilized in the past and has furnished us information in the past within Wounded Knee. Now, very frankly, I cannot identify him for obvious purposes.
There were almost surely spies within Wounded Knee. The U.S. government had infiltrated the American Indian movement like it had infiltrated every political organization.